Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing well and in great spirits. I don't do intros because I know your time is valuable, and so I try to get right to the point. Today I want to talk about mediocrity. So I hear a lot of, people of all ethnicities say, oh, we got to stick together, and then they want to lift up people from their community for everything they decide to do. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of that is driven by self-interest. If you look at my videos, going back to the first ones, I've been really consistent in calling out the local Raza politicians here, because I've seen them use resources intended to protect the community, like equipment to test the water, the air, what have you. I've seen them spend them in the wealthy communities where people vote. And I've seen them mislead the barrios, even though they're Mexican and are there on Cinco de Mayo, on the 16th of September, riding in the back of a lowrider, waving to people. I've seen them disfavor those same communities when it came to protecting the barrio's health, the well-being of the children. Studies are coming out now that air pollution affects your cognitive abilities. So, you're being further set back. It's harder to compete with kids that breathe clean air and brains function optimally. And I've been really consistent in that. I've always been for unity of all people. But the truth is, I call out a lot more black people than I lift up. I call out a lot more raza than I lift up. I call out a lot more Asians than I lift up. And the one thing I'm consistent in calling them out on is that they seem to be looking out for themselves more so than the greater public. They're ambitious. And so I think when you're driven by self-interest, sometimes you want to lift up people because of what they can do for you later on. And I've gone against the grain with people that, can be influential. I remember seeing a flyer for a lowrider event, and it had, a local politician's name and his little logo on the thing. And, he was being celebrated as a friend of the community, of the Raza, because he was letting them lowride in a certain place. And so, I said, hey, you guys do know that there's a lot of Mexican moms and dads that get together regularly and dedicate their time to figure out how to stop this politician from putting a homeless shelter right next door to the elementary school where all Mexican kids go. So he's a friend of the Raza because he allows one day of lowriding on a certain street, even though he wouldn't put a homeless shelter next to an elementary school that was white kids. And I shared a link of the same community where they were allowing this event, protesting him for doing that. They sued and stopped it. Now he's trying again a different way. And so I think people need to be really careful about who they lift up based on a single issue. There's a local, nonprofit that I think has done phenomenal work as far as social justice. Arguably, I'm where I'm at because they helped me at one point. But eventually I saw that the same people they were lifting for the social service benefits they were getting were the same people that were allowing polluters into that neighborhood, allowing all the systemic racism into that neighborhood. And that's why they were giving them money for services, because they were putting everybody there to spare wealthier neighborhoods. And so I'll kind of move away from politicians a little bit to, artists and musicians. You know, I often hear, well, we don't have raza representation. And the truth is, we probably got more representation than black folks. We got whole networks. We got whole countries broadcasting here in Spanish to a Spanish-speaking audience. You know, I've seen Mexican directors and actors win Oscars for Best Director, Best Movie, Best Actor. The girl who plays Wednesday is Mexican, and everybody's celebrating her for that. I don't think she's all that great of an actress, to be honest with you. I think some of it is she's just being celebrated for being Latina. And, you know, this is probably taboo for me to be saying this, but I'm an activist before I'm trying to be an actor, so I'm just going to say what I feel. I think when you try to lift up people simply because of their skin color and not their talent, you cheapen, no, you celebrate mediocrity, or you allow for mediocrity to happen. And that is ultimately what keeps us from reaching these very high levels, if that's the case. And that may be the case in some places. And I don't think the answer is rushing to lift up everybody who's trying to make it at it, but rather the ones who have a genuine talent. Because if you lift the wrong person and they don't have that God-given talent, guess what they're going to do? They're going to become the gatekeeper, and they're going to try and hold back those with the God-given talent to outshine them, because it's a nice place to be when everyone thinks you're the one, regardless of whether you really deserve to be there or not. And so, you know, to be clear, this isn't raza bashing. I've made it clear that, you know, I criticize way more black folks for their advocacy than I lift up. And pretty much all people of color, that's been the case. I've seen a lot more sellouts than true advocates. And, you know, the Bible says you shall know them by their fruits. So I think there's a lot of truth to that, you know. I'll think of, you know, I can use black folks as an example. I've recently heard an agency called out and told, you know, you had someone there who wasn't even black, but made so many inroads with the black community and was actually making a difference in a lot of black neighborhoods that have always been neglected and invisible to the government. And when your black folks came in, they pushed them out. And we feel like we took 20 steps back. We are 20 steps back from where we were with that person who wasn't even black. And the black folks saying that are the realest advocates I know. That's real talk. There is a black person in government that I really came to admire. And the reason I admired him was because he was the head of an agency. And when Fresno got a transformative climate communities grant, I think it was $56 million. The Board of Supervisors wanted to spend that to further develop downtown, even though the goal of that money was to help the marginalized communities in Fresno. And the person who, you know, helped with applying for the grant and the whole process, I have an interview with her on my channel in the justice section, Sandra, a woman I highly admire. And this head of an agency took the community side in these government processes and meetings and hearings so that the money wouldn't be spent where it wasn't intended. Like I said earlier, I've seen a lot of brown politics, all of them actually here, all of them. Well, not all of them. There's one that she got elected to a nice neighborhood, and as much as like I do bump heads, I think she tries. So I'll leave it at that. The other ones, not so much. And you know, as I said, you know, they get money for the body or the hood, what have you, and they'll spend it where people are going to vote. They won't spend it where it was supposed to be spent. And so I haven't really seen a lot of benefit from identity politics. You know, if I go to a public meeting, there's groups there with a label that identifies them as part of this identity or that identity. And for the most part, they're shilling for the government. They're there to lie to the people that look like them on behalf of the government in exchange for grants. So I haven't seen the benefit of lifting people up just because they look like me. And when it comes to, before I go to entertainment, I'll say this guy, what made him unique was that as head of an agency, he sided with the community against another government entity. And that is like pretty much unheard of. Government sticks together across agencies, across jurisdictions, what have you. I've always noticed they stick together. And the people that work for them tend to stick together, or they'll pay a price. And but this guy, he left that job to study law, and everyone who knew him pretty much thinks, or knows him, pretty much thinks that he'll be the president of the United States one day. He's pretty badass. He's very genuine, very kind, very capable. I remember we first met at an award ceremony, I think at the Capitol, right there behind the Capitol, actually. And when I went to shake his hand, he's like, "Oh man, give me a hug. I could tell you're a real one too." And I thought that was cool. And then it wasn't that though. It was people that I admire and respect saying he stood with the community against, you know, government systemic racism, even though he was appointed by the governor to this position. And, you know, he was leaving to go to law school. I don't know if that was a factor. People who aren't doing that and are relying on the next promotion might not be so vocal, but I'm not going to cheapen what he did. I've never heard nothing bad about him. And in all my interactions, he was cool. I only mention it because if you're in LA, Karen Bass just appointed him, I think, vice mayor of urban planning or some title like that. So she just made 5 appointments. He was one of them. And I think he'll be president one day. He's really intelligent, and he should be there because he's talented and capable, not because he's black. The fact that he's black, I think, is a positive because we need role models of people, you know, of color and of all ethnicities. But you shouldn't put them there just because they're a color. Because when you do, it ultimately hurts that community of color. If I lifted up every Mexican poet just because he was a Mexican poet, even if he wasn't talented as a poet, it would make Mexican poets look bad on the world stage to other poets, to the Dead Poets Society. I don't know if that's a thing, but the point is, when we're trying to lift up everybody, we might miss that one from our community that was actually going to make a difference. The one that could be the next Dr. Dre of producing. That could be, you know, the James Baldwin of the raza. That could be the Tom Petty of the raza, the Rolling Stones of the raza, the Pink Floyd of the raza. Because we're just lifting up everybody, and some people, they're just trying to make a buck. You know, they give you an image, and, you know, when I was a little kid, I remember Chips had an episode with some cholos, you know, had to watch it. Must have watched The Jerk with Steve Martin a whole bunch of times because they had a couple of cholos in there. Like, that's all it took at one time to make me interested in something. But I evolved. And now it doesn't need to have cholos in it for me to watch something. It needs to be intellectually stimulating so that I can go have intellectual conversations with other people of all ethnicities. And in that way, represent my people. Hey, you know, these Mexicans, you know, they're pretty smart. They can talk about real shit on a deep, meaningful level. And so I guess, you know, that's pretty much it. At this point, I'd probably be repeating myself. And so I'll do it just shortly. If you lift people up based on their skin color alone, you could be promoting mediocrity. And if you see someone who is talented then by all means. But where we're at right now, it seems like you could throw a sombrero and a poncho on a statue and put a sign in his hand that says "Viva la Raza," and everybody would be ready to name him the one. And maybe that's a sad reflection on the state of, you know, how marginalized some Raza communities are, that they're just so thirsty for a hero. And that's too bad. I hope you guys have a good one. And I hope you guys have a day that you're grateful for. I used to always say have a blessed one, but I've been really hung up on like words and their meanings and using them correctly. And I think a blessed day, it could be blessed if you're grateful. But otherwise, it relies on someone blessing you because you don't bless yourself. And so that's why I say, you know, I hope you have a day you're grateful for now, because I'm trying to be much more accurate with my words and staying true to their meanings. All right, have a good one. Have a day you're grateful for.